David Mercer sat silently at the end of the long walnut conference table, studying the faces surrounding him. These were the same people he had once trusted more than anyone else. Now they looked less like family and more like strangers waiting for him to surrender everything he had built. Only 4 days had passed since he buried his wife, Eleanor. After 43 years together, cancer had taken her far too quickly. The grief still hung over him like a heavy fog, yet no one in the room mentioned her. Instead, every eye focused on the stack of legal papers resting in front of his daughter-in-law. Vanessa slid the documents across the polished table with a confident smile. "You're not getting any younger," she said calmly. "It's time to hand the company over to the next generation. My son should become the new owner while you step aside and enjoy retirement." David looked toward his son, Michael, hoping to see disagreement or at least discomfort. Instead, Michael avoided eye contact, staring silently at the tabletop. That silence told David everything. He didn't argue. He didn't raise his voice. He simply folded his hands together and waited. Seconds later, the conference room door opened. His longtime attorney entered carrying a sealed envelope. Before anyone could ask why he had arrived, the lawyer quietly placed the envelope in front of Vanessa. Her confident smile faded. But the story didn't begin in that boardroom. It began 3 days earlier. The house felt unbearably empty after Eleanor's funeral. Every room reminded David of the life they had built together. From the photographs lining the hallway to the coffee mug she always left beside the kitchen sink. He stood washing a glass, trying to distract himself from the silence. The sound of expensive heels interrupted his thoughts. Vanessa walked into the kitchen wearing an elegant black business suit. She looked as though she were attending an important corporate meeting rather than mourning a family member. Without offering condolences, she placed a thick folder on the counter. Across the front, bold letters read, "Executive Succession Agreement." David slowly looked up. "What exactly is this?" "It's the responsible decision," Vanessa answered smoothly. "You're grieving. You're 70 years old. The company needs someone younger to lead it." She explained that her 19-year-old son, Ethan, should immediately become the official head of the family business while she and Michael managed daily operations behind the scenes. David almost laughed. Ethan had never worked a single day inside the company. His greatest accomplishment seemed to be posting photos of luxury cars online. Meanwhile, David and Eleanor had spent decades building the business from nothing. Their first office had been a tiny rented garage. Their first delivery truck had barely started on cold mornings. There were years when they survived on instant noodles because every extra dollar went back into the company. Now, only days after Eleanor's funeral, someone wanted him to hand over everything they had sacrificed to create. David kept his expression calm. "I appreciate your concern," he replied, "but I'm mourning my wife, not losing my ability to think." Just then, Michael entered the kitchen. He approached carefully and placed a hand on his father's shoulder. "Dad," he said softly, "maybe Vanessa has a point. Your health hasn't been great lately. You don't need all this stress anymore." His words sounded caring, almost rehearsed. "You can finally rest," Michael continued. "We'll handle everything from here." David studied his son's face. Years earlier, he had paid for the best schools money could buy. He had imagined Michael one day leading the company with confidence and integrity. Instead, he saw a man who rarely made decisions without first looking at his wife for approval. The disappointment hurt almost as much as the betrayal. "I'll review the paperwork," David said. Vanessa smiled, clearly believing victory was close. As they walked toward the front door, David remained in the kitchen. A reflection in the window caught his attention. Vanessa had stopped outside. Thinking no one could see her, she pulled out her phone and quickly typed a message. She smiled. "The old man is falling for it." David read her lips clearly. At that moment, he stopped grieving long enough to become something else. A businessman. And businessmen never survived by trusting appearances alone. David had spent more than 4 decades negotiating contracts, identifying dishonest partners, and surviving economic downturns that had destroyed other companies. One smug smile and a whispered text message were enough to tell him something wasn't right. The following morning, instead of driving to headquarters, he made an unexpected stop. His destination was the office of his oldest friend and personal attorney, Richard Collins. Richard had represented David's company since it was little more than a family operation with 6 employees. He had seen every contract, every expansion, every difficult decision. More importantly, he knew exactly how much Eleanor had feared that one day greed would divide the family. David placed Vanessa's succession agreement on Richard's desk. "I want you to find everything they're not telling me." Richard adjusted his glasses and began reading. Within minutes, his expression darkened. "This isn't just a retirement agreement," he said quietly. David folded his arms. "I had the same feeling." Richard continued, flipping through the pages. "If you sign this, you don't simply step away from daily operations. You permanently surrender your voting rights, ownership authority, and control over every major company asset." David remained silent. "There are even clauses allowing the board to remove you from the property if they determine you're interfering with management." Richard looked up. "They're not asking you to retire. They're trying to erase you." For a moment, neither man spoke. David stared out the office window. He wasn't angry. Not yet. Mostly, he felt disappointed. His wife had always insisted that money revealed people's true character. She used to joke that success was like bright sunlight. It didn't change who someone was. It only made it easier to see. Now he understood exactly what she meant. "I need answers," David finally said. "And I need proof," Richard nodded. "I already know where to start." Later that afternoon, David visited company headquarters without announcing his arrival. Normally, employees greeted him with warm smiles and stopped to chat. Today, something felt different. Conversations ended the moment he entered a room. Several department managers avoided eye contact entirely. Even the receptionist looked nervous. As David walked toward the executive offices, he noticed two unfamiliar security guards standing outside the boardroom. That had never happened before. One of them politely blocked his path. "Sorry, sir. Executive meeting in progress." David raised an eyebrow. "I'm the founder." The guard looked uncomfortable. "I understand, but we've been instructed not to interrupt." "Instructed by whom?" Before the guard could answer, the boardroom door opened. Vanessa stepped outside carrying a tablet. She acted surprised. "Oh, David, we were just discussing future planning. Without inviting me? It wasn't necessary." Her answer came too quickly. David smiled politely. "I see." She expected an argument. Instead, he simply walked away. From the corner of the hallway, he glanced back. The boardroom door remained slightly open. Inside, he recognized several investment consultants. There was also a representative from a large financial firm the company had never worked with before. Why would they be discussing financing while trying to convince him to retire? The question stayed with him all evening. That night, Richard called. "I found something." David immediately drove to his office. Several printed financial reports covered the conference table. Richard pointed to one highlighted section. 6 months ago, Michael and Vanessa created a separate holding company. "I've never heard of it. You weren't supposed to." The documents showed that the new company had quietly negotiated preliminary agreements with outside investors. Even more troubling, those agreements depended on one condition. David had to surrender control of the original business first. Only then could the investors purchase a majority interest. David slowly connected the pieces. "This was never about Ethan becoming the next generation," Richard nodded. "No, they're planning to sell everything." The realization landed harder than he expected. His wife had sacrificed birthdays, anniversaries, vacations, even her health, to help build the company. Employees had spent decades treating one another like extended family. To Michael and Vanessa, it was nothing more than a profitable asset waiting to be sold. David leaned back in his chair. "How many people know?" "Not many," Richard answered. "The agreements are confidential." David remained quiet for nearly a minute. Then he smiled. Not with satisfaction, with certainty. If they want to play strategy, they picked the wrong opponent. Richard raised an eyebrow. "I was wondering when that side of you would come back." David reached into his jacket and removed a small notebook Eleanor had always carried. Inside were handwritten notes she had made during the final months of her illness. One sentence was underlined. "Never confuse kindness with weakness." David closed the notebook. "They believe grief made me vulnerable. They're about to discover it made me patient." Richard smiled for the first time that evening. "So what's the plan?" David looked toward the city lights outside the window. "We let them think they're winning. And when they're absolutely certain, we show them exactly who still owns the board."